They were never meant to be the main characters. At least, that's what history seemed to have in mind. The spotlight of the Spanish monarchy traditionally falls on kings, queens, and heirs apparent, the ones whose portraits hang in museums and whose names are etched into the pages of history books. But behind the coronations, parades, and diplomatic handshakes, there have been women who quietly rewrote the rules of royalty. Women born into privilege yet bound by expectation, whose influence stretched far beyond palace walls, shaping Spain's culture, diplomacy, and identity in ways most people never realized. These are the Infantas, the princesses of Spain who didn't sit on the throne, but whose fingerprints can be found on everything from international relations to social programs. Their lives have been a blend of opulence and scrutiny, their public appearances meticulously choreographed, while their private struggles unfolded under the harsh glare of the media. They've walked red carpets in gowns worth more than a small apartment, yet also stepped into disaster zones wearing boots caked in mud, holding the hands of people who had lost everything. But here's the catch: their impact wasn't always obvious. It wasn't about grand speeches or sweeping political reforms. It was about subtle influence, building cultural bridges, funding medical research quietly, and showing up in places the cameras didn't always follow. And sometimes, it was about enduring storms that threatened not only their reputations, but the credibility of the monarchy itself. There have been scandals, high-profile court cases, failed marriages, and accusations that tested public trust. But there has also been resilience, adaptation, and an uncanny ability to remain relevant in a Spain that has changed dramatically over the decades. They've had to reinvent themselves, not just for personal survival, but to ensure that the institution they represent stays meaningful in a modern democracy. And while their names might not headline every history lesson, the truth is that the monarchy of today, and the one that will greet the next generation, would look very different without them. They've shown that royalty isn't just about wearing a crown. It's about navigating the delicate balance between tradition and modernity, between personal identity and public duty. Their story isn't just about Spain's past. It's about its present and its future. It's about how influence works in the shadows, how legacies are built in small, deliberate steps, and how sometimes, the ones who aren't in the center of the picture end up shaping the frame itself. So today, we're pulling back the velvet curtain to uncover the untold stories of Spain's unsung royal daughters. Their triumphs, their trials, and their lasting impact on a country still wrestling with the meaning of monarchy in the 21st century. Welcome to our channel, Words of Time. In this video, we'll dive deep into the remarkable, often overlooked lives of Spain's Infantas, exploring their role as cultural ambassadors, their quiet yet powerful philanthropic efforts, the scandals that reshaped their destinies, and the enduring legacy they leave for the future of the monarchy. When thinking about Spain's monarchy, the gaze almost instinctively turns toward the reigning sovereigns, currently King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia, along with the storied succession of male rulers that have come before them. Yet to understand the shaping forces behind the modern Spanish state, society, and even its cultural diplomacy, it is essential to shift focus toward a parallel, less celebrated tradition. The lineage of royal women whose influence extended quietly, yet decisively far beyond ceremonial duties. These women, often defined in popular imagination by their titles, infantas, princesses, duchesses, were in fact agents of diplomacy, political maneuvering, cultural patronage, and social reform. Their reach was not always official, but it was enduring, weaving itself into the very fabric of Spain's 20th and 21st century identity. This tradition of quiet but deep influence is not new. For centuries, royal women in Spain balanced the expectations of dynastic marriages, ceremonial appearances, and motherhood with subtle forms of political agency. Their roles were shaped by the conventions of the court, but also by the unique moment in history they inhabited. In the early 20th century, for instance, the Bourbon Restoration placed Queen Victoria Eugenie, granddaughter of Britain's Queen Victoria, at the center of a modernizing yet politically unstable monarchy. Her marriage to King Alfonso XIII was as much a strategic alliance as it was a royal love story, linking Spain more firmly to Britain and Europe's interwoven royal houses. While her life was marked by personal tragedy and the upheaval of exile after the proclamation of the Second Republic in 1931, Victoria Eugenie left an indelible mark on Spanish society through her patronage of healthcare initiatives, notably improving nursing standards and hospital systems. These were not casual interests. They were deliberate, long-term projects aimed at modernizing Spain's public health infrastructure. Such precedents laid a path for later generations of royal women who understood that their influence could be exercised most effectively in areas less subject to direct political contestation: culture, humanitarian work, and symbolic diplomacy. This is where the Infantas of Spain, especially the sisters and aunts of reigning kings, played quietly transformative roles. Princess Pilar, Duchess of Badajoz and older sister of King Juan Carlos I, is one such figure. Pilar's life unfolded at the intersection of aristocratic tradition and modern public service. After decades in exile with her family during Franco's dictatorship, she returned to Spain following the restoration of the monarchy in the 1970s. Her most enduring contribution came in the field of sports administration. She served as president of Spain's Equestrian Federation and held significant roles within the International Olympic Committee. By championing sports, she was not merely indulging a personal passion. She was leveraging sport as a tool for Spain's soft power and international image building in the post-Franco era. Her public demeanor, warm, approachable, and outspoken, also challenged lingering stereotypes about aloof royalty. Similarly, Infanta Elena, eldest daughter of King Juan Carlos I and Queen Sofia, has embodied a different dimension of influence. Though never queen, she has carried out official engagements and represented Spain abroad, but her most notable work has been in education and disability advocacy. In her role with the Mafre Foundation, she has supported initiatives aimed at integrating individuals with disabilities into the workforce and improving road safety, a pressing issue in Spain given its high traffic accident rates in past decades. Through such sustained involvement, she has reinforced the notion that modern royalty could contribute to tangible, measurable social progress without direct political intervention. Infanta Cristina's trajectory, by contrast, reveals the fragility of royal influence when it collides with public scandal. Highly educated, fluent in multiple languages, and initially seen as an asset to the monarchy's international profile, she engaged deeply in humanitarian work through her connection with the Caixa Foundation and in sports administration. Yet the Noos corruption case involving her husband, Iñaki Urdangarin, overshadowed much of her prior contributions. This episode illustrates how the actions of royal family members can affect not only their personal reputations, but also the credibility of the institution as a whole. The enduring takeaway is that while royal women can wield influence through philanthropy and public engagement, that influence is also uniquely vulnerable to the pressures of media scrutiny and shifting public sentiment. Queen Sophia's example offers perhaps the most sustained demonstration of how a consort can shape a country's cultural and diplomatic posture over decades. Born Princess Sophia of Greece and Denmark, she married then Prince Juan Carlos in 1962, entering a Spain still under dictatorship. Her early years as queen consort after the monarchy's restoration in 1975 were defined by careful navigation between tradition and the expectations of a modernizing nation. She became a patron of the arts and sciences, helped promote Spanish cultural heritage abroad, and lent her support to numerous humanitarian causes, especially those concerning children, education, and the underprivileged. Her ability to remain a respected figure during moments of political strain, such as the attempted coup in 1981 and later during the abdication of Juan Carlos, reflects the quiet resilience that has characterized the most effective royal women. Fast forward to the present, and we find Queen Letizia, a figure whose background as a journalist and commoner has redefined certain public perceptions of royalty. From the outset, she has embraced issues like public health, education, and literacy, often with a technocratic precision rooted in her professional training. Her advocacy for rare diseases and mental health awareness has brought visibility to topics that historically received less attention from Spain's royal house. While she has faced media scrutiny, sometimes over matters as trivial as wardrobe choices, her strategic engagement with international organizations and forums has underscored the continuing relevance of royal soft power in an interconnected world. It is also worth noting the generational shift represented by Princess Leonor, heir presumptive to the Spanish throne, and her younger sister Infanta Sofia. While their public roles are still in formation, their education, multilingual upbringing, and early exposure to both national and international duties signal a continuation of the tradition where royal women, even before ascending to the throne, are groomed to contribute meaningfully to Spain's representation. Leonor's enrollment at the United World College of the Atlantic in Wales, an institution known for its emphasis on global citizenship, suggests a deliberate preparation for a role that will require not only ceremonial duties, but also substantive engagement with global issues. In examining this long arc of female royal influence, one sees recurring patterns. The use of culture and sports as diplomatic tools, the championing of humanitarian and social causes, the cultivation of international connections, and the careful negotiation of public image in the face of changing media landscapes. Unlike the formal political power of kings, the influence of these women often operates in subtler, yet sometimes more enduring ways. They can advocate for reforms without triggering constitutional debates, forge connections across borders through personal diplomacy, and embody values that resonate beyond partisan divides. However, their ability to shape public life has always been contingent upon both the stability of the monarchy and their own ability to maintain credibility. In the 21st century, this challenge has intensified due to the immediacy of digital media and the erosion of deference to royal institutions. Every public appearance, every statement, and every personal choice is subject to instant analysis and interpretation. For today's royal women, this means that their advocacy work must be both authentic and strategically communicated to withstand the scrutiny of an audience that is more diverse and critical than ever before. From a broader historical perspective, the story of Spain's royal women is not merely a subchapter of the monarchy's history. It is an integral narrative that reflects the evolving role of symbolic leadership in a democratic society. They embody the paradox of modern royalty, possessing no formal political authority, yet capable of influencing public priorities and international perceptions. Whether through the refinement of cultural diplomacy, the expansion of humanitarian initiatives, or the redefinition of royal accessibility, these women have extended the monarchy's relevance beyond its constitutional limits. The influence of Spain's royal women has also been shaped by the country's own transformations, from dictatorship to democracy, from relative isolation to full integration into the European Union. In each phase, they have adapted their roles to reflect new realities. During the Franco years, exiled royal women served as unofficial ambassadors for the legitimacy of the Bourbon claim. In the transition era, they became symbols of stability and continuity. In the current democratic context, they function as public servants in a symbolic yet impactful capacity, channeling attention and resources toward causes that might otherwise struggle to find visibility. What emerges from this examination is a portrait of influence that is both resilient and adaptive. The women of Spain's royal family have, over generations, cultivated a space where they can operate effectively without overstepping the delicate boundaries of constitutional monarchy. Their tools have been patronage, public engagement, and the art of presence, being in the right place at the right time to lend legitimacy, attract attention, or confer prestige. These are subtle levers of influence, but they can shift public priorities and international perceptions in lasting ways. By tracing this lineage of impact, one sees that the monarchy's endurance in Spain is not solely the result of constitutional provisions or political maneuvers. It also owes much to the sustained, often understated work of its women, past and present, who have managed to align personal commitment with the broader needs of the nation. They have navigated exile, scandal, political change, and the relentless gaze of the public while maintaining a focus on service. This is the essence of their hidden influence, a capacity to shape the national narrative without dominating it, to embody stability while engaging with change, and to do so with a blend of tradition and modernity that keeps the institution relevant in the eyes of a skeptical yet fascinated public. The popular image of a princess is often framed in glittering ceremony, opulent dresses, and carefully choreographed appearances. Yet the reality of Spain's royal daughters, past and present, is far more layered and, in many cases, surprisingly grounded in the everyday concerns of their country. To uncover the untold stories of those who became pillars of Spanish society, one must look beyond the ceremonial facade into the spaces where influence is exerted quietly but persistently through philanthropy, professional commitment, advocacy, and personal resilience. What emerges is a history of women who, though bound by tradition and constrained by constitutional neutrality, found ways to embed themselves in the fabric of Spain's civic and cultural life. Their contributions are diverse, their paths not always free from controversy, but together they form a tapestry of service and adaptation that reveals much about how symbolic figures can still shape the lived experience of a nation. Consider first the example of Infanta Isabel, eldest daughter of Queen Isabella II, who came of age in a turbulent 19th century marked by political instability, wars, and shifting alliances. She was far from a remote figure in the public imagination. Isabel became a visible presence in Madrid's streets, mingling with citizens in a way that blurred the traditional boundaries of royalty. While she never reigned, her personal popularity was immense, in part because she cultivated a rapport with ordinary Spaniards, attending charity events, visiting hospitals, and showing a directness that endeared her to many. She also supported cultural initiatives, particularly in music, which reflected Spain's rich artistic heritage. At a time when the monarchy's legitimacy was often in question, her accessibility and visible compassion helped humanize the royal family in the eyes of the public. This blend of tradition and approachability would become a recurring theme among later royal women. Princess Pilar, born in the mid-20th century as the eldest child of Don Juan, Count of Barcelona, and thus sister to King Juan Carlos I, inherited a very different set of circumstances. Raised largely in exile during Francisco Franco's dictatorship, Pilar experienced firsthand the disconnection between the monarchy and the Spanish public. When the monarchy was restored in the 1970s, she embraced her role not as a distant figurehead, but as a participant in civic life, particularly in sports administration. Her leadership in the Spanish Equestrian Federation and later her position with the International Olympic Committee were more than honorary titles. They were platforms for promoting Spain's international standing. She oversaw programs that developed equestrian sports domestically, supported young athletes, and fostered ties with the global sporting community. In doing so, she leveraged a traditionally aristocratic pursuit into a modern tool for diplomacy and national branding. Infanta Elena, eldest daughter of King Juan Carlos I and Queen Sofia, offers another compelling case of a princess whose work straddles tradition and tangible service. Known for her strong work ethic and reserved public demeanor, Elena pursued higher education, earning a degree in education sciences, and later took on responsibilities within the Mafre Foundation. Her projects have often centered on social integration for individuals with disabilities, as well as road safety campaigns aimed at reducing Spain's historically high accident rates. While these causes may seem less glamorous than royal galas, they have had measurable impacts, influencing policy discussions and public awareness. Elena's commitment reflects a broader shift in royal engagement, from ceremonial charity patronage to active participation in initiatives with concrete societal outcomes. Infanta Cristina, by contrast, presents a more complex narrative. Highly educated, with a degree in political science and a master's in international relations, she seemed well-positioned to be a bridge between Spain and the wider world. Fluent in several languages, she worked with the Caxias Foundation on cultural and humanitarian projects, supporting microcredit programs and international development initiatives. Yet her potential as a pillar of civic life was undermined by the noose corruption scandal involving her husband, Iñaki Urdangarin. Although she was ultimately acquitted of criminal charges, the lengthy legal proceedings damaged her public standing and served as a cautionary tale about how personal associations can erode decades of constructive work. Still, her earlier efforts in promoting cultural diplomacy and social development remain part of the historical record, demonstrating how royal women often navigate both the opportunities and the risks inherent in their public roles. Looking further back, Princess Eulalie of Spain, daughter of Queen Isabella II, offers an unconventional example of royal influence. Living through exile, restoration, and another wave of political upheaval, Eulalie was known for her intellectual curiosity and independent spirit. She traveled extensively, met with political leaders, and even published memoirs and essays that expressed her views on social and political issues, an unusual move for a royal woman of her time. Her willingness to speak publicly, even critically, about matters of governance and society set her apart, though it sometimes created friction within the royal family. Eulalie's life illustrates that influence need not be confined to formal philanthropy. It can also manifest in the realm of ideas, where a princess can serve as a cultural interlocutor and provocateur. The reach of these women often extended into the arts and heritage preservation. Infanta Paz, another daughter of Queen Isabella II, devoted much of her life to charitable work and the promotion of cultural initiatives, particularly those tied to historical preservation. Through patronage and advocacy, she helped safeguard elements of Spain's artistic and architectural legacy during a period when modernization threatened to erode traditional heritage. Her work reflects a recurring pattern among Spanish royal women, an awareness that cultural identity is a form of soft power, and that preserving it serves both the nation and the monarchy's symbolic role. In more recent times, Queen Sofia has epitomized the idea of a royal woman as a cultural and humanitarian anchor. While technically not a princess in her primary role, her decades of service began long before her husband's accession. As consort, she cultivated an image of discretion and dedication, aligning herself with causes such as children's welfare, mental health, and support for marginalized communities. Through the Queen Sofia Foundation, she has championed initiatives ranging from Alzheimer's research to disaster relief, often stepping into spaces where political leaders could not easily act without triggering partisan divides. Sofia's presence at international events, her ability to engage with cultural leaders, and her sustained commitment to humanitarian causes have positioned her as a steadying force during periods of political and institutional strain. The emergence of Queen Letizia, formerly a journalist, has further broadened the profile of royal women in Spain. Her professional background brings a different skill set to the role, a facility with media, a direct communication style, and a focus on contemporary social issues. Her work on public health, education, and literacy often involves collaboration with experts and organizations in ways that echo the structured project management of her earlier career. By taking a hands-on approach to her causes, she has demonstrated that royal advocacy in the 21st century can be data-driven, strategic, and responsive to emerging societal needs. Her emphasis on topics like rare diseases and mental health reflects a modern understanding that visibility can drive funding, research, and public empathy. Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia represent the next chapter in this evolving story. Though still very young, they have already begun to take part in official events, with Leonor in particular being prepared for the responsibilities of a future monarch. Her education at the United World College of the Atlantic in Wales is emblematic of the monarchy's investment in producing leaders with a global perspective. Both sisters have been introduced gradually to ceremonial duties, suggesting a deliberate strategy to balance the preservation of mystique with the cultivation of relatability. In an era when young people are often skeptical of inherited privilege, their ability to connect authentically with their generation could prove crucial to the monarchy's relevance. What unites these varied figures is not a single formula for influence, but a shared capacity to adapt their roles to the needs of their time. In some cases, this has meant embracing formal responsibilities within civic institutions. In others, it has involved more personal, grassroots forms of engagement. The common thread is the recognition that the symbolic capital of royalty can be deployed in service of public goods, whether in sports, healthcare, education, cultural preservation, or humanitarian relief. This work is often incremental and sometimes overshadowed by the spectacle of royal life, yet its cumulative effect is significant. These women's stories also reveal the vulnerabilities inherent in such roles. Unlike elected officials, they cannot point to a mandate or policy record to defend their relevance. Their legitimacy rests largely on public perception, which can shift quickly in response to scandal, political shifts, or generational change. Maintaining credibility requires a careful balance of visibility and discretion, tradition and modernity, national focus and international reach. The successes and missteps of figures like Infanta Cristina underscore that while influence can be built over decades, it can also be undermined in a fraction of that time. In tracing the arc of these lives, it becomes clear that the pillars they form within Spanish society are not static structures but dynamic ones, shaped by personal choices, historical currents, and the evolving expectations of the public. They stand at the intersection of heritage and progress, embodying the monarchy's attempt to remain relevant in a democratic age. Through their actions, they have expanded the definition of what it means to be a princess, not merely a symbol of continuity, but an active participant in the nation's civic life. The story of the Infantas' early lives is one rooted in the contradictions of privilege and scrutiny, freedom and duty. Infanta Elena and Infanta Cristina, the two daughters of King Juan Carlos I and Queen Sofia, were born into a royal family that had only recently been restored to Spain's constitutional framework. Their childhoods were marked by the promise of modernity within the monarchy, yet also by the weight of centuries-old expectations. Growing up in the Zarzuela Palace during the late 1960s and 70s, they inhabited a space that was both intimate and emblematic. A family home, yes, but also a national symbol. The palace environment they knew as children was unlike the courtly grandeur of earlier centuries. Juan Carlos and Sofia cultivated a relatively informal domestic atmosphere, partly to align with their own personalities, and partly as a deliberate choice to make the monarchy feel more accessible in post-Franco Spain. Yet even within this casual family structure, protocol seeped into daily life. Elena and Cristina were raised with the understanding that they were public figures from birth, that their actions would reflect on the institution, and that the public's interest was not a passing curiosity but a constant condition. Education was central to their upbringing, though not merely in the conventional academic sense. Both sisters attended Santa Maria del Camino School in Madrid, where they studied alongside peers from influential Spanish families, followed by higher education that reflected their individual interests. Infanta Elena's decision to pursue a degree in education sciences at the Complutense University of Madrid spoke to her long-standing interest in teaching and social development. Later, she undertook further studies in early childhood education at the University of La Sorbonne in Paris, signaling a willingness to expand her horizons beyond Spain's borders. Infanta Cristina took a different academic path, earning a degree in political science and sociology from the Complutense University before pursuing a master's degree in international relations at New York University. This exposure to international perspectives deepened her understanding of diplomacy and development, and her multilingual fluency, Spanish, English, French, and Catalan, was a practical asset in her later roles. Both sisters thus entered adulthood not as passive recipients of titles, but as educated women equipped to engage with a range of social and cultural issues. From the start, their public roles reflected the balance between personal aspiration and institutional responsibility. Elena's early engagements often revolved around cultural events, educational initiatives, and representation at official ceremonies, both domestically and abroad. She developed a reputation for discretion, rarely courting publicity beyond what was required. This understated approach contrasted with the media's growing appetite for royal coverage in the 1980s and 90s, a period when glossy magazines and television segments began to amplify the personal lives of public figures. Cristina's early professional life seemed to be an extension of her academic focus. She joined the social projects arm of the Caixa Foundation, where she worked on cultural exchanges, development programs, and microcredit initiatives. Her involvement was not purely ceremonial. Colleagues noted her diligence and ability to navigate complex administrative tasks. This hands-on approach positioned her as a potentially transformative royal figure, someone who could bridge the symbolic and the practical. Yet it was also during these formative years that the sisters learned the double-edged nature of public life. The media was increasingly omnipresent, and while official events allowed them to shape their public image deliberately, private moments were more difficult to protect. Romantic relationships, vacations, and even minor missteps were fodder for speculation. They had to develop a resilience to gossip and a discipline in managing their personal narratives, understanding that any appearance could become a point of national discussion. Marriage brought another dimension to their public identities. In 1995, Infanta Elena married Jaime de Maricalar, a banker with ties to France's aristocracy. The wedding, held in Seville's cathedral, was a national spectacle, but Elena approached her married life with the same quiet sense of duty that had marked her single years. She continued her work in education-related causes and took on additional responsibilities as her parents' representative. Her dignified bearing, especially in later years when her marriage dissolved, reinforced her reputation as a steady, dependable member of the royal family. Infanta Cristina's marriage in 1997 to Iñaki Urdangarin, an Olympic handball player, initially seemed like a perfect blend of royal glamour and athletic success. The couple's image was modern and dynamic, embodying the monarchy's connection to sports and contemporary Spain. Together, they represented the crown at various events and undertook charitable work, further cementing Cristina's role as a proactive royal figure. However, the trajectory of Cristina's public life shifted dramatically with the emergence of the Palma Arena case, which later became part of the wider Noos Institute corruption scandal. The allegations involved embezzlement of public funds through a non-profit organization led by Urdangarin, with Cristina implicated as a board member. The years-long legal process that followed placed her under unprecedented scrutiny, challenging both her personal credibility and the image of the monarchy. Although she was ultimately acquitted of criminal charges, the scandal left a deep mark, resulting in her semi-withdrawal from official duties and a move to Switzerland. This period revealed the vulnerability of royal influence in the face of public suspicion, no matter how extensive earlier contributions might have been. The contrast between the sisters' paths is striking. Elena's career has been marked by a consistent, if understated, devotion to public service, largely unmarred by scandal. Her work through the Maffrey Foundation, particularly in integrating individuals with disabilities into the workforce and promoting road safety, has been steady and tangible. Christina, meanwhile, began with similar promise, but faced the challenge of rehabilitating her public image after legal turmoil. Their divergent experiences underscore how the same upbringing, resources, and institutional backing can lead to different public legacies depending on personal choices and circumstances. In their early years, both sisters also set precedents that would influence the next generation of royal women. They were among the first in Spain's modern monarchy to pursue higher education abroad, to engage in professional work outside the palace before assuming full-time royal duties, and to balance motherhood with public responsibilities. These choices signaled to younger royals, such as Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia, that service to the crown could be compatible with independent professional experience, at least in the early stages of life. The subtler impact of their early lives lies in how they navigated the expectations of being both symbols and individuals. They learned to operate within the monarchy's constitutional limits while still seeking areas where they could leave a personal imprint. Whether in education reform, cultural promotion, or humanitarian work, they demonstrated that influence need not always be headline-grabbing to be meaningful. Even in times of crisis, their conduct shaped public perceptions of what it means to be a royal woman in Spain. Elena's dignified handling of her divorce, avoiding public disputes, and continuing her duties without interruption, reinforced a model of quiet resilience. Christina's eventual decision to live outside Spain during the height of the Noos scandal, while controversial, reflected an understanding that her presence could overshadow the institution's work, an implicit acknowledgement of the fine line between personal rights and institutional responsibility. Their early lives thus serve as a study in adaptation. Born into a monarchy still defining its place in democratic Spain, they became active participants in its modernization. Their education, early careers, and public conduct reflected a balance of privilege and accountability, personal ambition and collective duty. Through successes and setbacks, they have left a legacy that is as much about the lessons learned as it is about the achievements recorded. Much of the groundwork for contemporary Spanish arts and social programs was quietly laid not in parliamentary chambers or ministerial offices, but through the often overlooked charitable and cultural patronage of Spain's royal women. These endeavors, sometimes framed as acts of ceremonial benevolence, were in reality strategic contributions to the country's civic life, planting seeds for institutions, initiatives, and traditions that endure to this day. They were rooted in a long-standing European tradition in which royalty served as patrons of the arts and sponsors of welfare projects. But in Spain, particularly in the 20th and 21st centuries, this tradition took on distinctive forms, shaped by the nation's political transitions and its evolving cultural identity. Many of these initiatives began during the years when Spain was re-establishing its monarchy after decades of political upheaval. The return of the Bourbons under King Juan Carlos I in the 1970s brought with it an opportunity to redefine the role of the royal family in a democratic context. While the king navigated constitutional reforms and the queen embodied diplomatic continuity, the Infantas and other royal women began weaving themselves into the cultural and social infrastructure of the country. Their contributions often went unnoticed in the political press, but in the spheres of education, heritage preservation, and the arts, their influence was considerable. Infanta Pilar, Duchess of Badajoz, stands as a prime example of how royal patronage could operate far beyond the realm of ceremonial ribbon-cutting. In addition to her well-known role in sports administration, she championed causes that supported artisan traditions and cultural preservation. She was involved in promoting exhibitions that highlighted Spain's equestrian heritage, not merely as a sport, but as a living cultural expression linked to regional identities. By working with museums and regional cultural councils, She helped secure funding and visibility for institutions that might otherwise have struggled to survive in an increasingly globalized economy. These efforts contributed to a broader national conversation about safeguarding intangible heritage, a concept that would later become central to Spain's cultural policy in the 21st century. Infanta Elena's charitable work, though often associated with her position at the Mafre Foundation, extended into the arts in subtle ways. Mafre's cultural branch became a significant force in organizing art exhibitions, supporting Spanish artists, and bringing international works to Spanish audiences. Under Elena's patronage, the foundation sponsored retrospectives of painters, photographers, and sculptors whose work reflected both Spain's traditions and its contemporary evolution. These exhibitions were not merely cultural events. They were tools of education, fostering art appreciation across demographics and making high-quality exhibitions accessible outside Madrid's and Barcelona's elite circles. Elena's approach to patronage was pragmatic. She understood that art, to thrive, needed audiences, and audiences needed access. Infanta Cristina, before the Noos scandal altered her public trajectory, was deeply involved in cultural diplomacy. Through her work with the Caixa Foundation, she helped establish cultural exchange programs that brought Spanish music, theater, and visual arts to other countries while introducing foreign works to Spanish audiences. This bidirectional exchange served both as soft power and as enrichment for Spain's own cultural landscape. Cristina's emphasis on accessibility in these programs, often ensuring that events were free or low cost, helped broaden participation, particularly among students and young people. It's easy to overlook now, but in the 1990s and early 2000s, when Spain was consolidating its place in the European Union, these cultural initiatives played a subtle but important role in shaping how the country was perceived abroad. The role of Queen Sofia in cultural and charitable work is so vast that it is difficult to separate one from the other. Through the Queen Sofia Foundation, she has been instrumental in projects that bridge the arts, heritage conservation, and social welfare. The foundation has funded restoration projects for historical sites, supported music festivals, and provided scholarships for young artists. Many of these initiatives operate at the intersection of culture and community development, for example, restoring a historic building and then repurposing it as a cultural center that offers art classes, concerts, and educational programs. Sofia's long-standing support for the Reina Sofia School of Music has ensured that Spain remains a hub for classical music training, attracting both domestic and international talent. Her consistent presence at concerts, exhibitions, and academic events lends these initiatives not just financial backing, but also symbolic legitimacy, encouraging corporate and private donors to contribute. Going further back, the cultural groundwork laid by earlier royal women, such as Infanta Isabel, cannot be overlooked. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Isabel's patronage extended to theater, literature, and public festivals. Her visible presence at performances and her willingness to support young playwrights and musicians helped create a more vibrant artistic climate in Madrid. She was also a supporter of charitable hospitals that incorporated the arts into patient care, a practice that has echoes in contemporary programs that use music or visual arts as therapeutic tools. Princess Eulalia's role in cultural exchange was unconventional but significant. Her travels and writings introduced Spanish audiences to foreign perspectives on art, politics, and society, while her advocacy for women's education subtly aligned with the growing movement for women's participation in the cultural sphere. Although she did not create enduring institutions in the same way as some of her relatives, her influence was intellectual and inspirational, challenging the notion that royal women's engagement with culture should be purely decorative. In more recent decades, the arrival of Queen Letizia has brought a modern sensibility to royal cultural patronage. Her focus is often on literature and journalism, reflecting her own professional background. She has served as a visible advocate for literacy programs, presiding over awards that recognize excellence in Spanish-language literature and journalism. Her participation in book fairs and her visits to schools underline the message that cultural literacy is foundational to social progress. Letizia's approach is notably hands-on. She engages in detailed conversations with artists, authors, and educators, and often incorporates their insights into her speeches and public engagements. This creates a feedback loop in which patronage is not merely top-down, but responsive to the needs of those working in the cultural sector. Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia, though still in the early stages of their public lives, have begun to be associated with cultural events aimed at younger audiences. Their attendance at concerts, exhibitions, and youth forums is part of a deliberate strategy to link the monarchy with the next generation's cultural tastes and concerns. In doing so, they signal that the royal family's engagement with culture will remain relevant, evolving to encompass digital media, contemporary art forms, and multicultural influences. Charitable endeavors outside the strictly cultural realm have also had lasting effects on Spanish society. Many of these were initiated in periods when public social services were either underdeveloped or inaccessible to large segments of the population. Royal sponsorship provided both immediate relief and the foundation for more formal programs later adopted by the state. For example, the Queen Sofia Foundation's work in healthcare, particularly its support for Alzheimer's research, paved the way for broader national strategies addressing dementia care. Similarly, initiatives in disaster relief and support for marginalized communities often filled gaps in state provision, demonstrating the value of quick, visible intervention. Infanta Elena's advocacy for road safety through Mafre reflects a model in which royal backing can draw attention to issues that might otherwise remain under the radar. In the 1990s, traffic accidents were a significant public health concern in Spain, claiming thousands of lives annually. The campaigns she supported combined public awareness efforts with research funding, contributing to the eventual decline in accident rates. This kind of targeted intervention shows how royal influence, though lacking legislative power, can contribute to tangible improvements in public welfare. Infanta Pilar's charitable work in the healthcare sector, particularly with organizations supporting cancer research and treatment, demonstrated another avenue for royal impact. By associating her name with fundraising events and awareness campaigns, she lent credibility and visibility that encouraged participation from both the public and corporate sponsors. The funds raised under her patronage not only supported immediate care, but also financed research that has since advanced treatment options in Spain. These acts of patronage and charity share a common thread. They were embedded in the social realities of their time, addressing immediate needs while also laying a foundation for future development. In the arts, this often meant building institutions and fostering audiences. In social programs, it meant filling service gaps and demonstrating models that could later be institutionalized. In both cases, the royal women's involvement carried symbolic weight, reinforcing the idea that cultural enrichment and social welfare were national priorities worthy of sustained investment. While much of this work was conducted quietly, its cumulative effect is visible in the landscape of modern Spain. Museums and cultural centers bear the names of royal patrons. Music schools and literary awards trace their origins to royal initiatives. Healthcare and social services have been strengthened by early interventions that combine public attention with practical support. The monarchy's formal constitutional role may be limited, but in these domains, the impact has been substantive. The forgotten nature of some of these contributions speaks to a paradox inherent in royal service. When it is most effective, when programs become self-sustaining, when cultural institutions gain independence, when social initiatives are adopted by the state, the royal origin often fades from public memory. The project ceases to be royal and becomes simply part of Spain's civic fabric. This invisibility is, in a sense, the ultimate success of such endeavors, even if it means that the individual contributions of Infanta Pilar, Infanta Elena, Infanta Cristina, Queen Sofia, Queen Letizia, and their predecessors are less celebrated than they deserve. Seen in continuity with their other roles, these charitable and cultural activities reinforce the idea that the monarchy's survival in modern Spain has depended not only on political neutrality and ceremonial presence, but also on a steady investment in the nation's intellectual and social capital. By embedding themselves in the arts and social programs, the royal women have aligned the institution with values that transcend political cycles: creativity, compassion, education, and community resilience. These are not just symbolic virtues. They are practical assets that have helped sustain and enrich Spanish society across decades of change. The modern history of Spain's royal daughters is as much about adaptation under pressure as it is about service and tradition. Scandals, whether of a personal, familial, or institutional nature, have repeatedly forced the monarchy to navigate treacherous waters where public trust and national identity intersect. For the Infantas Elena and Cristina, as well as for other female members of the Casa Real, these storms have been defining moments, compelling them to reassess their roles and, at times, to step back entirely from public life. The way they managed these challenges has reshaped public perceptions not only of themselves, but also of the monarchy's place in a democratic society. The Noailles scandal stands as the most significant and damaging crisis involving a Spanish royal in recent decades. What began as a sports and cultural events consultancy run by Iñaki Urdangarin, husband of Infanta Cristina, spiraled into a major corruption investigation. Public prosecutors alleged that the organization had diverted millions of euros in public funds through inflated contracts and falsified invoices. As a member of the board and co-owner of a related company, Cristina was drawn into the case, which came to be known simply as El Caso Noailles. The Spanish public, already grappling with economic austerity measures after the financial crisis of the late 2000s, reacted with outrage. The image of a royal family member under judicial investigation for financial misconduct struck at the very heart of the monarchy's symbolic role as a unifying, apolitical institution. For Cristina, the years of court proceedings were a test of personal resilience and legal strategy. She maintained her innocence throughout, arguing that she had trusted her husband's business dealings without scrutinizing the details. Ultimately, the court acquitted her of criminal charges, though she was ordered to pay a fine as a beneficiary of the embezzled funds. The damage to her public standing, however, was profound. Her presence in the official activities of the royal family became untenable, and in a decision that carried both symbolic and practical implications, King Felipe VI, her younger brother, stripped her of the title Duchess of Palma de Mallorca in 2015. Cristina's move to Geneva, Switzerland, allowed her to maintain a degree of privacy while continuing her work in the nonprofit sector. But it also underscored the fact that her role within the Casa Real was now largely severed. Infanta Elena's position during this period offered a study in contrast. Although she faced her own personal upheaval, most notably her separation from Jaime de Maricolar in 2007 and their eventual divorce in 2010, her public image remained largely intact. Unlike Cristina, she was not entangled in legal controversies. Instead, she maintained a steady schedule of engagements, often representing the crown at events the king or queen could not attend. Her role was less high-profile than in earlier years, but her consistency and discretion earned her a quiet respect from both the public and the media. The divorce itself, though unprecedented in the modern Spanish royal family, was handled with remarkable dignity. Elena refrained from public comment on the circumstances, maintaining a cordial relationship with her ex-husband in public settings for the sake of their children. In doing so, she set a precedent for how royal figures might navigate personal separation without diminishing their public service. This approach stood in contrast to the more sensationalized royal divorces seen in other European monarchies and reinforced the perception of Elena as a stabilizing presence during a turbulent time for the institution. While these personal and legal challenges unfolded, the monarchy was also undergoing generational and structural changes. King Juan Carlos I's abdication in 2014, prompted in part by declining popularity amid scandals of his own, marked a turning point. His successor, Felipe VI, brought a more restrained, transparency-focused style of leadership, making it clear that he intended to distance the institution from any lingering taint of corruption. For his sisters, this meant recalibrating their roles. Cristina's effective exclusion was the most visible shift, but Elena, too, found her public functions reduced as Felipe streamlined the number of working royals to focus primarily on himself, Queen Letizia, and their daughters, Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia. This recalibration reflected both practical considerations and a broader effort to modernize the monarchy. In an era of increased media scrutiny and political polarization, a leaner royal household was seen as a way to minimize risk and concentrate resources. For Elena, the adjustment meant channeling more of her time into her role at the Mafre Foundation, where she could continue contributing to social causes without being as directly tied to the day-to-day ceremonial work of the Casa Real. For Cristina, it meant building a life and career outside Spain, engaging in international charitable work without the formal backing of the monarchy. These evolving roles also highlighted the tension between tradition and modernity that has always been present in constitutional monarchies. Traditionally, royal daughters, particularly those not in the direct line of succession, could expect to serve as lifelong representatives of the crown, their status secured by birthright. Modern realities, however, have shown that such positions are not guaranteed. Public opinion now plays a decisive role, and the expectation that royal figures must embody transparency and accountability has made it possible, even necessary, for members to be sidelined when their presence becomes a liability. The way the Casa Real handled the Noos scandal and its aftermath signaled an institutional awareness that survival depends on adaptability. Felipe VI's decisive actions, stripping titles, reducing the roster of active royals, and publicly disclosing the royal household's budget, were designed to reassure the public that the monarchy was not above the principles of justice and fiscal responsibility. For Cristina, these moves were personally painful, but they also reflected the reality that the monarchy's image takes precedence over individual interests. For Elena, the same period underscored the value of a low-profile, steady approach. She became, in some ways, a symbol of the working royal as a functional role rather than a position of celebrity. By continuing her engagements without courting controversy, she demonstrated that the monarchy could maintain a link to tradition while operating within the constraints of modern expectations. Her example offered a model for how future non-heir royals might serve without overshadowing the core of the institution. These developments also had implications for the younger generation. Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia have grown up in a climate where the pitfalls of public life are more visible than ever. The experiences of their aunts serve as both cautionary tales and instructive examples. From Cristina's trajectory, they can see how personal associations and business dealings must be approached with extreme care. From Elena's, they can learn the value of discretion, consistent service, and a focus on causes that resonate with the public. In broader terms, the royal daughter's navigation of scandal and evolving roles mirrors the challenges faced by many long-standing institutions in democratic societies. The balance between tradition and modernity is not static. It must be recalibrated in response to shifting norms, heightened transparency, and the accelerating pace of public judgment. For the Spanish monarchy, these women's experiences have helped define the boundaries of acceptable conduct and the strategies for damage control. The stormy episodes have also served to humanize the royal family, albeit in complex ways. Scandals strip away the carefully curated aura of perfection, revealing vulnerabilities that can evoke both criticism and empathy. When Cristina appeared in court as a defendant, the image was unprecedented, a royal subjected to the same legal process as any other citizen. For some, this was a sign of a healthy democracy. For others, it was a source of shame. The mixed reactions underscored the ambivalence with which modern Spaniards view their monarchy, respect for its historical and ceremonial role coexisting with skepticism about its relevance and integrity. The Casa Real's ability to weather such storms has depended on a combination of decisive leadership, symbolic gestures, and the quiet resilience of members like Elena. By contrast, the sidelining of Cristina illustrates the limits of rehabilitation when public trust has been deeply eroded. Both paths reflect an understanding that the monarchy is not an immutable entity, but a living institution that must adapt to survive. Over time, the turbulence has also influenced the scope and nature of royal engagements. The emphasis has shifted toward areas where the monarchy can have a visible, positive impact without crossing into politically contentious territory: arts and culture, education, social welfare, and heritage preservation. For those members who continue in public roles, this focus offers a way to maintain relevance while honoring the institution's constitutional constraints. The interplay between scandal and evolving roles has thus reshaped the monarchy in subtle but lasting ways. It has narrowed the circle of active royals, increased the demand for professional conduct, and underscored the importance of aligning personal lives with the values the institution claims to represent. For the Infantas, the lessons have been hard-earned, but they have contributed to a broader understanding within the Casa Real that adaptability is not a choice but a necessity. In the years following the storms that engulfed the Casa Real, the public image and personal choices of the royal daughters became more than private matters. They became barometers for the monarchy's capacity to adapt to a society whose democratic identity had matured considerably since the post-Franco transition. The Spain of the 21st century, shaped by economic crises, political fragmentation, and the rapid spread of digital media, no longer viewed the monarchy as a static, unquestionable pillar. Its survival increasingly depended on its ability to resonate with a citizenry more informed, more skeptical, and more attuned to issues of accountability than ever before. For Infanta Cristina, the experience of being drawn into the Noos scandal was not merely a legal ordeal. It was a crucible in which her identity as a royal and as a private citizen was tested under relentless scrutiny. Every decision she made during this period, whether to remain in Spain or relocate abroad, whether to speak publicly or remain silent, was weighed not only for its legal implications, but also for how it would reflect on the institution as a whole. Her eventual choice to reside in Geneva and pursue work with international organizations carried a dual message. On one hand, it was an act of self-preservation, allowing her to continue contributing in spheres like development and humanitarian work while avoiding the constant glare of the Spanish press. On the other, it signaled a tacit acknowledgement that her direct involvement with the monarchy had become untenable, and that maintaining distance was itself a form of service to the institution. This retreat from public royal duties was not without cost. Cristina had been an active figure in the royal family's engagements for years, and the loss of that role was both personally and symbolically significant. Yet, by removing herself from the core circle of the Casa Real, she arguably helped preserve its stability during Felipe VI's early reign, a period when he was determined to restore trust through transparency and a tighter focus on the immediate line of succession. The sacrifice was therefore twofold. She relinquished a visible role she had long held, and she accepted a permanent redefinition of her identity in the public consciousness, from a trusted royal working mother to a cautionary tale about the hazards of blurred lines between personal loyalties and institutional integrity. Infanta Elena's trajectory during the same period highlighted an alternative model of adaptation. She too faced personal changes, most notably her divorce from Jaime de Maricolar, but the way she navigated those challenges kept her within the bounds of acceptable public conduct for a royal figure in a constitutional monarchy. She made deliberate choices to maintain a dignified silence on private matters, to uphold cordial relations for the sake of her children, and to avoid any appearance of impropriety in her professional or personal associations. This disciplined approach meant that she could continue representing the crown when necessary, even if her official engagements were reduced under Felipe's streamlined model. Elena's steadfastness carried strategic value for the monarchy. In a time when trust in public institutions was eroding, compounded by economic hardship and political scandals, her image as a dutiful, if less visible, royal provided a counterbalance to the negative press surrounding her sister. She did not attempt to reinvent her role or claim a greater public profile. Instead, she adapted by focusing on her position at the Mafre Foundation, directing her energies toward initiatives in culture, education, and social inclusion. These were areas that aligned with the monarchy's preferred non-political domains, thus reinforcing the image of the crown as a promoter of national unity through soft power rather than political influence. The contrast between Cristina's withdrawal and Elena's quiet continuity became emblematic of two divergent responses to crisis within a royal context. One was an enforced exile from the core of the institution, born of scandal's corrosive power. The other was a gradual repositioning that allowed continued, if diminished, participation. Both paths required personal sacrifices. Cristina lost her title and the prestige of her former role, while Elena accepted a reduced public presence and the loss of her marriage's symbolic unity. But in their own ways, each choice served the same strategic end: to shield the monarchy from further destabilization at a moment when its legitimacy was under close public examination. These personal choices intersected with the broader evolution of the monarchy's role in a democratic Spain. The institution could no longer rely on unquestioned reverence rooted in tradition. It had to actively cultivate legitimacy in a political environment where Republican sentiment, though not dominant, was increasingly vocal. Transparency measures, budget disclosures, and the visible reduction of the working royal roster were all part of this recalibration, and the roles, or absence, of the Infantas were central to the narrative. Cristina's absence served as a public example of accountability, however painful, while Elena's restrained service embodied the kind of low-risk engagement the new era demanded. The long-term impact of these adjustments on their individual legacies is complex. For Cristina, the stain of the Noos scandal is indelible in the eyes of many Spaniards, regardless of her acquittal. She is remembered less for her earlier charitable work and more for her proximity to one of the monarchy's most damaging controversies. Yet, there is also a strand of public opinion that views her as a figure who paid a high personal price, not solely for her own actions, but for the missteps of those close to her. In this light, her legacy may, over time, be reframed as one of reluctant self-exile for the greater good of the institution. Elena's legacy, by contrast, is one of quiet endurance. She has not sought to redefine the monarchy or to leave a dramatic personal mark on Spanish public life, but her steady presence has given her a reputation for loyalty and service. In historical terms, she may be remembered as a working royal in the purest sense, committed to her duties without pursuing the limelight, embodying a traditionalist model of royalty in an age that often prizes charisma over consistency. While this might not capture the public imagination in the way more flamboyant figures do, it offers a form of stability that is, in its own way, indispensable to the monarchy's survival. The influence of their choices extends beyond their own reputations. For the younger generation, Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia, the examples set by their aunts serve as both guidance and warning. Leonor, as heir presumptive, will inherit not just the crown but the lessons learned from her family's recent history. The necessity of impeccable personal conduct, the importance of aligning one's private life with the institution's public mission, and the understanding that in a democracy, public opinion can be as decisive as constitutional law in determining the monarchy's longevity. Sofia, while not in direct line to the throne, will also face the challenge of defining a role that is meaningful yet protected from the kinds of vulnerabilities that ensnared Cristina. In the broader sweep of Spanish history, the royal daughter's experiences during this era illuminate the shifting nature of constitutional monarchy itself. In the late 20th century, their roles were shaped largely by tradition and ceremonial duty. By the second decade of the 21st century, those roles were being reshaped by the demands of transparency, the scrutiny of a 24-hour news cycle, and the growing expectation that royal figures must justify their existence through tangible contributions to society. This evolution mirrors Spain's own maturation as a democracy, moving from a transitional phase in which institutions were shielded by consensus to a more contested space where all are subject to critical evaluation. The monarchy's standing in this rapidly changing environment is, therefore, inseparable from the public image of its individual members. Felipe VI's efforts to streamline the royal household and focus its public role on a smaller, more disciplined core were, in part, a response to the divergent paths taken by his sisters. The contrast between the scandal-driven departure of one and the steady, if subdued, service of the other underscored the stakes of personal conduct in preserving institutional credibility. This dynamic is likely to inform the monarchy's internal decisions for years to come, particularly as it prepares for the eventual transition from Felipe to Leonor. The story of the Infantas in this period is one of adaptation under pressure, personal sacrifice for institutional survival, and the enduring tension between individual identity and collective responsibility. Cristina's withdrawal and Elena's quiet persistence reflect two different strategies for navigating the same underlying challenge: how to reconcile the inherited privileges and duties of royalty with the demands of a democratic society that increasingly insists on merit, transparency, and accountability. Their legacies will be debated, reinterpreted, and reframed in the decades to come, but their impact on the monarchy's evolution in the early 21st century is already unmistakable. Even as the political storms and personal tribulations of the royal family dominated the national conversation, there was another, quieter current running through the lives of the Infantas, one rooted in diplomacy, culture, and the patient work of philanthropy. While scandals may have briefly defined public discourse, the sustained, less visible efforts of these women in the realms of cultural representation and charitable support created an enduring legacy that outlived fleeting headlines. This was not the high drama of court politics or the visible pomp of state ceremonies. It was instead the steady cultivation of Spain's image abroad and the nurturing of causes that spoke to the country's values, history, and aspirations. The role of a cultural ambassador in a constitutional monarchy is often misunderstood. It is not about overt political maneuvering or direct economic negotiation. Rather, it involves weaving together threads of history, tradition, and contemporary achievement into a narrative that resonates with foreign audiences. For Infanta Elena and Infanta Cristina, this meant drawing upon Spain's artistic heritage, linguistic ties, and shared historical moments to create lasting impressions in the minds of those they encountered on the international stage. This work, subtle and often overshadowed by more sensational news, was central to sustaining Spain's soft power in the global arena. Infanta Elena, with her deep appreciation for classical Spanish culture, became a living embodiment of the nation's artistic and literary traditions. Her engagements abroad often featured visits to museums, libraries, and universities, where she would speak not only about Spain's Golden Age painters or its towering literary figures, but also about contemporary artists and authors shaping the nation's modern identity. These visits carried symbolic weight, affirming Spain's position as a cultural powerhouse whose influence extended far beyond the Iberian Peninsula. Her presence at international book fairs, particularly in Latin America, reinforced the bonds of language and literature that unite the Spanish-speaking world. The emphasis on shared culture, rather than political agendas, allowed her to foster goodwill even in regions where Spain's historical legacy is viewed with mixed feelings. Infanta Cristina's approach to cultural diplomacy was shaped by her academic background and professional experiences in international organizations. She was particularly adept at linking Spain's heritage with global development goals, framing cultural exchange as part of a broader commitment to education, sustainability, and social justice. In her international travels, she would often highlight Spanish contributions to scientific research, architecture, and environmental conservation alongside its more famous artistic and culinary exports. This positioned Spain not merely as a nation of past glories, but as an active participant in shaping the future. Her role as a board member or patron of various cultural and educational institutions allowed her to connect Spanish initiatives with global networks, thereby multiplying their reach and impact. Beyond their work as cultural emissaries, both infantas devoted significant energy to philanthropic endeavors. The nature of this work was often deliberately low profile, not because it lacked ambition or scope, but because it was rooted in long-term commitments that did not lend themselves to media-friendly spectacle. This quiet dedication meant that many of their contributions escaped public notice, yet they often proved vital in sustaining organizations and programs that might otherwise have struggled to survive. Elena's philanthropic portfolio was heavily influenced by her work with the Mafre Foundation. Under her stewardship, the foundation supported a wide range of initiatives, from road safety campaigns to medical research and educational programs for underprivileged youth. One of her consistent priorities was ensuring access to the arts for individuals who might not otherwise have the opportunity to experience them. Children from low-income backgrounds, people with disabilities, and elderly individuals in care homes. This focus reflected her belief that cultural participation is not a luxury, but a fundamental component of human dignity. Her work also extended to disaster relief efforts, particularly in Latin America, where the foundation provided aid following earthquakes, hurricanes, and other emergencies. By linking Spain's philanthropic presence to tangible acts of solidarity, she helped cement the country's reputation as a reliable and compassionate partner. Cristina's philanthropic focus leaned toward health, education, and environmental sustainability. She was a long-standing supporter of medical research, particularly in areas affecting children, and collaborated with organizations dedicated to eradicating preventable diseases in developing countries. Her work often intersected with her professional expertise in international development, allowing her to bring both practical knowledge and institutional connections to the causes she championed. Environmental advocacy was another significant thread in her philanthropic activities. She supported initiatives to protect marine ecosystems, promote sustainable fisheries, and raise awareness about the impacts of climate change on vulnerable communities. By framing environmental protection as a shared global responsibility, she was able to engage diverse stakeholders, from local fishermen to multinational corporations, in dialogue and action. These philanthropic efforts were not conducted in isolation from their cultural roles. In many cases, the two spheres overlapped, creating opportunities for synergy. A cultural event might double as a fundraiser for a medical research initiative. An educational exchange program could incorporate environmental awareness into its curriculum. By blurring the lines between cultural diplomacy and charitable work, the Infantas maximized their influence while reinforcing a cohesive narrative about Spain's contributions to the global community. Their ability to operate effectively in these overlapping spaces was facilitated by a unique combination of factors. As members of the royal family, they had access to networks of influence that could open doors for the organizations they supported. At the same time, their personal interests and professional experiences gave them credibility beyond their titles. This blend of status and substance was crucial in ensuring that their engagements were not dismissed as ceremonial or superficial. Instead, they were able to position themselves as genuine advocates for the causes they championed, capable of mobilizing resources and attention in ways that had real-world consequences. The impact of this work on Spain's image abroad was significant, if not always immediately visible. Cultural diplomacy and philanthropy operate on a long timeline. The relationships they build and the goodwill they generate often bear fruit years or even decades later. By consistently showing up in art galleries and hospital wards, at international summits and rural development projects, the Infantas contributed to a reservoir of positive sentiment towards Spain that could be drawn upon in times of diplomatic or economic need. Their quiet dedication also offered a counter-narrative to the image of the monarchy as an out-of-touch institution. At a time when public skepticism toward elites was high, the willingness of these royal women to engage directly with communities, to listen and to learn, helped humanize the crown. Even when their appearances were not widely publicized, word-of-mouth accounts of their warmth, curiosity, and commitment filtered back into public consciousness, gradually shaping perceptions in ways that no press release could achieve. This form of influence was especially important in regions where Spain's historical legacy is complex. In parts of Latin America, for example, memories of colonialism still inform national identity and political discourse. In such contexts, overt displays of royal privilege could easily be counterproductive. By focusing on shared culture, mutual respect, and practical cooperation, the Infantas were able to sidestep potential tensions and build relationships based on present-day values rather than historical grievances. The same approach proved effective in other parts of the world, from Africa to Asia, where Spain sought to expand its partnerships in trade, education, and environmental conservation. The philanthropic and cultural work of the Infantas also had a domestic dimension. Within Spain, their support for medical research, education, and environmental protection contributed to a sense of national pride. These initiatives reminded citizens that the monarchy could serve as a unifying force not only through symbolism, but through concrete action. By aligning themselves with causes that resonated across political and regional divides, they helped reinforce the idea that certain values, compassion, creativity, stewardship, transcend partisan politics. Of course, their work was not immune to criticism. Some argued that their philanthropic efforts, however sincere, could not erase the damage done by scandals or the structural privileges of royalty. Others questioned whether their positions gave them an unfair advantage in championing causes that might otherwise struggle to gain attention. Yet, even among critics, there was often an acknowledgement that the causes themselves were worthy and that the attention they received, regardless of the source, brought tangible benefits to those involved. In the long arc of history, the cultural and philanthropic roles of Infanta Elena and Infanta Cristina may prove to be as consequential as their more publicized trials and tribulations. These roles reflect an understanding that monarchy in a democratic age cannot survive on tradition alone. It must actively contribute to the society it serves, and it must do so in ways that are meaningful both at home and abroad. By acting as cultural ambassadors and philanthropic powerhouses, the Infantas have helped redefine what service looks like in the modern Spanish monarchy. Less about ceremony, more about connection. Less about grandeur, more about impact. And it is here, in this blending of the symbolic and the practical, that their true legacy may lie. The art exhibitions they opened, the scholarships they funded, the environmental campaigns they supported. These are not the stuff of sensational headlines, but they are the building blocks of lasting influence. In the end, it may be these quiet acts of bridge building and goodwill that shape how they are remembered, both within Spain and far beyond its borders. The measure of a royal's legacy is rarely found in the grand ceremonies or official decrees that fill history books. For the Infantas, the quiet but persistent influence they exerted over decades of public life has created a legacy that is less about formal power and more about redefinition. Their trajectory from young princesses bound by strict court protocols to seasoned public figures navigating the challenges of a democratic Spain mirrors the broader evolution of the monarchy itself. This transformation, personal, institutional, and cultural, has left traces across nearly every facet of Spain's public life, shaping not only the monarchy's place in society, but also the country's image of what a royal can and should be. In examining the scope of their impact, it is impossible to ignore the moments of public controversy that punctuated their lives. Royal weddings have long been both fairy tale spectacles and political statements, their guest lists, venues, and ceremonial details scrutinized for symbolic meaning. The marriages of the Infantas, particularly Infanta Elena's union with Jaime de Maricalar and Infanta Cristina's with Inaki Urdangarin, were no exception. At first glance, these events appeared to blend tradition with a cautious embrace of modernity. The brides wore gowns that nodded to historical precedent while incorporating contemporary touches, and the ceremonies followed the grandeur expected of a royal wedding. Yet, the controversies that emerged in their wake, ranging from whispered disapproval within aristocratic circles to media commentary on the suitability of their matches, revealed the enduring tensions between romantic autonomy and dynastic expectation. In retrospect, the significance of these unions lies less in the pageantry and more in the ripple effects they caused within the institution. They marked one of the first times in recent history when Spanish royal women openly exercised personal choice in selecting their spouses, signaling a gradual departure from the purely strategic alliances of earlier generations. This shift, while aligned with the values of a modern constitutional monarchy, also opened the door to the vulnerabilities that accompany such choices. When those marriages later faltered, Elena's ending in divorce and Cristina's marred by legal scandal, the fallout was both deeply personal and institutionally significant. The public was forced to confront the reality that royal lives, like all lives, are susceptible to disappointment, conflict, and error. This exposure of human frailty, while painful for the individuals involved, paradoxically contributed to a new kind of resilience for the monarchy. By surviving public marital breakdowns and personal crises without retreating entirely from their duties, the Infantas embodied a form of perseverance that resonated with ordinary Spaniards. Their willingness to continue working, attending public events, and supporting charitable causes in the face of personal adversity challenged the stereotype of royalty as insulated from life's hardships. It suggested that service to the country could endure even when personal narratives did not fit the idealized mold. The endurance of this spirit has had a profound influence on the current generation of royal women. Queen Letizia, for example, entered the royal family not from an aristocratic lineage, but from a career in journalism, bringing with her a keen awareness of public perception and media narratives. While her path is distinct from that of the Infantas, the space for a figure like her to thrive within the institution was widened by the precedents set by Elena and Cristina, precedents that showed adaptability, personal autonomy, and modern sensibilities could coexist with tradition. Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia, growing up in a media-saturated environment that demands transparency and relatability, also inherit the lessons of how to balance private identity with public role. The examples set by their aunts illustrate both the opportunities and the challenges of this balance, offering a kind of lived blueprint for navigating the scrutiny that comes with their positions. The legacy of the Infantas extends beyond family dynamics into the broader realm of Spanish identity. In a nation where regional identities are strong and historical grievances remain potent, the monarchy functions as one of the few institutions that can claim to represent the entire country. The Infanta's philanthropic and cultural engagements, ranging from rural education projects in Castile to cultural exchanges in Latin America, helped reinforce this unifying role. By championing causes that transcended regional and political divides, they contributed to a sense of shared national purpose. Their work in preserving and promoting Spain's artistic and historical heritage also reinforced pride in a cultural legacy that belongs to all citizens, regardless of political affiliation or regional allegiance. Yet their influence on Spanish identity is not purely symbolic. Through their careers and personal choices, the Infantas challenged traditional expectations of royal women. Elena's commitment to public service, even after her divorce, demonstrated that a woman's value to the institution need not be tied to her marital status. Cristina's professional career with organizations like the Aga Khan Foundation showed that royal women could contribute to international development and diplomacy in substantive, rather than merely ceremonial ways. These examples expanded the scope of what roles royal women could credibly occupy in the 21st century. The controversies that touched their lives, most notably the Noos scandal involving Cristina and her husband, also played a paradoxical role in this redefinition. While the immediate impact was undeniably damaging, The long-term effect included a sharpening of public expectations for transparency and accountability within the monarchy. In adapting to these demands, the royal household undertook reforms that have, in some respects, made it more robust and responsive to public sentiment. Christina's legal ordeal, however personally and reputationally costly, became a turning point in the monarchy's relationship with the Spanish people. It forced a public reckoning with the idea that no one, regardless of title, is above the law, a principle that ultimately strengthens the democratic framework in which the monarchy operates. The future implications of this legacy are complex. On one hand, the precedent set by the Infantas suggests that future royal women will have greater latitude to shape their own roles, pursue independent careers, and engage with the public in ways that reflect their personal interests and talents. On the other hand, the scrutiny they endured serves as a cautionary reminder that such freedom comes with heightened accountability and potential vulnerability. As Spain continues to grapple with questions about the role and relevance of the monarchy, the lived experiences of the Infantas will inform both public opinion and institutional strategy. Internationally, the model of royal engagement they embodied, combining cultural ambassadorship with targeted philanthropy, remains a valuable tool for soft power. Spain's cultural exports, from flamenco to fine art, are deeply intertwined with its national identity, and the ability to promote these in a manner that feels authentic rather than performative is a skill the Infantas honed over decades. Their work abroad has left a reservoir of goodwill that future generations can draw upon, particularly in Latin America and Europe, where historical and linguistic ties create natural opportunities for collaboration. Domestically, their legacy will also be felt in the evolving relationship between the monarchy and the media. The intense coverage of their lives, both the celebratory and the scandalous, has contributed to an environment where the royal family must be adept at managing narratives. The Infantas learned, sometimes the hard way, how to navigate the competing demands of privacy, transparency, and public engagement. The strategies they developed, whether in maintaining dignity during personal crises or in amplifying charitable work through selective media coverage, will remain relevant as newer members of the family step into the spotlight. Perhaps the most profound aspect of their legacy lies in the way they embodied the contradictions of modern royalty. The tension between tradition and progress, privilege and service, privacy and visibility. These contradictions are not easily resolved, but the manner in which they navigated them offers valuable lessons for the monarchy's future. They showed that resilience is not simply a matter of enduring hardship, but of adapting to change without losing sight of one's core values. They demonstrated that influence can be exercised quietly, through sustained engagement and personal example, as effectively as through grand gestures. Their contributions to the complex tapestry of Spanish identity are thus multifaceted. They are woven into the country's cultural life through their patronage of the arts, into its social fabric through their charitable initiatives, and into its political consciousness through the debates their lives sparked about the role of the monarchy. They are reminders that history is shaped not only by those who sit on the throne, but also by those who work in its shadow, whose impact is felt in ways that may not be immediately visible but are nonetheless enduring. In the decades to come, as historians and the public look back on this era of the Spanish monarchy, the Infantas will likely be seen as pivotal figures in its modernization. Their lives encompassed the highs of ceremonial splendor and the lows of public scandal, but through it all they maintained a commitment to service that helped sustain the monarchy's relevance in a rapidly changing society. The bridges they built, between past and present, between Spain and the wider world, between the institution and its people, will remain part of the monarchy's foundation for years to come. In looking across the arc of the Infantas' lives, what emerges is not a neat narrative of perfection or scandal neatly resolved, but something far richer, a testament to the complexity of public service in a modern democracy. They began life as symbols of continuity, born into a Spain still adjusting to the return of its monarchy after decades of dictatorship. They matured into adulthood during a period of profound political, economic, and cultural transformation, navigating an environment in which every decision they made was filtered through the lenses of both tradition and public opinion. Their personal stories, marriages celebrated and dissolved, careers pursued, causes championed, and controversies endured, are inextricably bound up with the story of Spain itself. When the country modernized, so did the expectations placed upon them. When political and economic storms shook national confidence, They were expected to provide stability, even when their own lives were in upheaval. The balance between public duty and personal autonomy, always fragile for royalty, was tested again and again in their lives. In this sense, their resilience was not simply an individual trait, but an institutional necessity. Theirs was a kind of influence that often defied easy categorization. At times, they were cultural ambassadors, standing alongside Spain's most celebrated artists, dancers, and writers, ensuring that national traditions were shared abroad and cherished at home. At other times, they were philanthropic leaders, lending their voices to causes ranging from children's health to environmental conservation. Sometimes they were lightning rods for public debate, their choices, whether in love, in career, or in conduct, sparking national conversations about what a royal should be. And sometimes they were simply human beings in the public eye, navigating grief, disappointment, and joy with the whole country watching. What makes their legacy particularly significant is the way it has altered the parameters for those who follow. The next generation of royal women, Queen Letizia, Princess Leonor, and Infanta Sofia, will operate within a framework shaped in no small part by the Infantas' experiences. They inherit both the expanded opportunities and the cautionary lessons that come from decades of trial, adaptation, and endurance. They step into roles where authenticity is now expected, where service must be substantive rather than ceremonial, and where the ability to connect with citizens on a personal level is as vital as upholding the dignity of the crown. In the public imagination, the Infantas' lives have also served to subtly humanize the monarchy. For many Spaniards, seeing royal women experience divorce, career shifts, and personal setbacks has made the institution seem less remote, less untouchable. This human connection may well be one of the most enduring contributions they have made, because it fosters a sense that the monarchy is not an abstract relic of the past, but a living, evolving institution inhabited by people who share, at least in part, the challenges of ordinary life. Internationally, the bridges they have built through cultural diplomacy and charitable initiatives remain a vital asset. Spain's relationships with countries in Latin America, Europe, and beyond are strengthened not just by political agreements and trade, but by the cultural and humanitarian goodwill cultivated over years. In a global landscape where soft power is increasingly valuable, this reservoir of goodwill will continue to benefit Spain long after the specific events that created it are forgotten. Yet perhaps the deepest message their lives leave behind is about the nature of legacy itself. It is tempting to measure influence in terms of public approval ratings, media coverage, or visible achievements. But the Infantas story suggests that true legacy is often cumulative, built quietly over time through countless acts of representation, support, and presence. It is forged not only in the moments of triumph, but in the way one responds to difficulty. Their legacies are not flawless, nor should they be. They are textured, layered, and at times contradictory, much like the history of Spain itself. The Infantas' journey offers a reminder that the role of a royal in a modern constitutional democracy is neither fixed nor purely ceremonial. It is a living role, shaped as much by the character and choices of the individual as by the demands of tradition. To be a modern Spanish royal, as they have shown, is to inhabit a space where heritage meets adaptation, where privilege is tempered by service, and where personal identity must constantly be balanced with public expectation. For the institution they represent, their lives stand as proof that adaptability is not a weakness but a survival strategy. For the Spanish people, their stories offer both caution and inspiration. Caution in recognizing the risks of high visibility and human fallibility. Inspiration in seeing that service and resilience can persist even through personal upheaval. And for the next generation of royals, their example provides a roadmap. Not a perfect one, but a real one, marked by the kinds of detours and corrections that make a journey authentic. The message that emerges, then, is simple yet profound. Legacy is not about avoiding storms, but about learning to navigate them with purpose. The Infantas may never have been the central figures of Spain's monarchy in title, but in influence, they have left an indelible mark. Their blend of tradition and individuality, of ceremonial duty and personal agency, has helped redefine what it means to serve as a royal in modern Spain. They have shown that while crowns and titles may pass from one generation to the next, the true weight and worth of the role is carried in the choices, actions, and resilience of those who wear them. And so, in the intricate weave of Spain's contemporary history, their threads, bright, complex, sometimes frayed but always present, remain vital to the pattern. In the years ahead, when future historians and citizens look back on this chapter, they will see not only the headlines but also the quieter, enduring work that shaped a monarchy capable of standing in the modern world. It is in that quiet work, often done without fanfare, that the truest measure of their contribution will be found.